They filed the petition 2 weeks after my return. It came by certified mail, addressed not to my home, but to the post office box I kept for anything tied to service records. The envelope was thin, deliberate. A single staple held the pages together. It had been printed cleanly, without margin notes, without correction tape. Government formatting. I sat at the counter and opened it with the edge of a butter knife. Inside, a formal notice from the Polk County Courthouse. My father, Thomas L. Miller, as petitioner. Myself, Sarah J. Miller, as respondent. The first page accused me of fraudulent military representation under Iowa State Code. The second requested formal injunctive relief, an order for me to cease using my name in association with any implied or explicit military distinction. The third stated in plain terms that I had brought reputational harm and disgrace to the Miller family, our history, and our standing in the community. I read the document once, then again. My name was typed 12 times. His was typed 14. Nowhere in the entire packet did it mention a conversation, a phone call, a question. He had gone straight to court. I placed the papers back into the envelope, folded the flap over once, and set it on the corner of the kitchen table. The laminate edge had been chipped since I'd moved in, and my thumb found the ridge without thinking. Outside, a tree branch tapped the window in even intervals. The dishwasher clicked into its rinse cycle. I sat still until it stopped. That night, I didn't sleep. I took a legal pad from the drawer and began listing what I knew, not just about my case, but about him. The years of remarks, the patterns, the dismissals. I didn't write down emotions. I wrote facts, dates, incidents, silence. I didn't call anyone, not my brother, not the attorney I'd consulted once about estate matters, and not my father, especially not him. Instead, I retrieved my uniform jacket from the back of the hall closet and laid it flat on the bed. It hadn't been worn in months. The left sleeve still held the faint crease from where I'd folded it too tightly during my last move. The shoulder bore the patch from my final unit, 89th Sustainment Brigade, based out of Wichita. Support, logistics, paperwork. The kind of service no one brags about, but without which nothing moves. I'd spent 3 years routing supply lines, tracking inventory, managing shipment discrepancies from warehouses with leaking roofs and mice in the corners. I'd done graveyard shifts with coffee that burned and chairs that squeaked and backup generators that never failed, because I never let them. I got one injury, knee ligaments torn on a loading dock, a fall so ordinary the medic didn't bother writing down the exact height. I filed for treatment. I signed everything myself. I returned to duty after rehab. I asked for nothing. I expected nothing. But I had served. And now my father wanted the record to reflect otherwise. The courthouse sat on 4th Street between a shuttered florist and a tax office with sun-bleached signs in the windows. I parked 2 blocks away, walked in early. No escort, no greeting. The clerk at the front desk barely looked at me when I signed in. I didn't mind. The courtroom was narrow, too bright. The benches were polished but worn, indentations carved by generations of shoes and boots and restless knees. At the front, a table had been prepared with 3 chairs, one for my father, one for his attorney, and one left empty. I took a seat in the back. The attorney stood first. He was young, confident, wore a pinstripe tie, and used his hands too much when he spoke. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not about punishment. It is about truth. Miss Miller has for years implied military distinction that cannot be substantiated through public channels. There are no medals, no deployments, no public record of valor. And yet she has used these claims, subtly perhaps, but consistently, to elevate her position in this community and shame those around her." He let that last sentence land. My father nodded solemnly. He wore the same navy jacket he used for church and town council meetings. His tie had a small snag on the lower edge, which I remembered from my cousin's wedding. He had not bought a new one for this. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, "you may speak." He stood, cleared his throat once, and folded his hands in front of him. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he began, in the same voice he once used to tell neighbors about the price of diesel. "I've supported Sarah for years. I've respected her choices. But I can't ignore this anymore." He looked around the courtroom. There were 6 other people in the gallery. None of them turned their heads. "I don't recognize the person she claims to be," he said. The room went quiet. Not tense, just still. I didn't speak. I didn't rise. I didn't shake my head or glance toward him. I kept my hands clasped in my lap. The skin along my thumb had begun to split from the cold. I pressed it gently with the other hand until the sting passed. The judge nodded once and recessed for lunch. I stepped out into the hallway, found a seat by the vending machine, and waited. At 1 p.m. sharp, they called us back in. This time, I stood when asked. "Miss Miller," the judge said, "do you have documentation?" I opened my bag and handed the file to the clerk. Inside, my DD-214, issued and signed. Orders from Fort McCoy, Fort Riley, and the Wichita base. Medical documentation from the VA confirming injury and discharge. Pay stubs. Deployment orders for Operation Spartan Shield, even if I'd never left the airstrip. Letters of commendation. Not many. Just enough. The clerk handed them up. The judge's eyes moved slowly across the top page, then down to the unit listing. She paused, then looked up. Her expression changed, not softened, not hardened. It settled. "I recognize this designation," she said. My father shifted. The attorney glanced at his notes. The judge tapped once on the paper in front of her. "I wore this same patch, years ago. Different war, different base, but the same core. Support. The ones who don't get medals or write books." She looked down again. "Your service is valid, Miss Miller, and it is recorded." She said nothing else for a full minute. Then carefully, she turned back to my father's attorney. "Do you have anything further?" The attorney cleared his throat. He began, but then stopped. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded once. Petition denied. No gavel, no applause, just a clerk jotting down the words and the sound of paper being collected. I remained still until the room cleared. My father didn't look at me. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and walked out the side door. He did not wait for his attorney. I waited another 5 minutes. Then I stood, gathered my things, and walked back out into the cold. My name was still mine. So was the truth. I didn't go home right away. The courthouse hallway smelled like disinfectant and coffee left too long on a burner. I paused near the bulletin board, pretending to read announcements. My pulse had returned to normal. My breathing was steady. But something under my ribs still felt braced, not from fear, from recognition. The kind you feel when a truth finally becomes external. Outside, a newspaper box clattered in the wind. A red sedan idled by the curb. I walked past it without glancing inside. At home, the envelope still sat on the corner of the table. I left it there. I went to the desk drawer and retrieved the folder I had started months ago, before the petition, before the court. It held screenshots, bank alerts, and notes written in small block print. Receipts, emails, flagged correspondence. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just patterns, documented carefully. It began with a credit monitoring alert, an access attempt tied to my father's address, then a second, this one asking about beneficiary procedures. When I called the bank, the representative asked calmly if I'd authorized anyone else to manage my finances. I hadn't. She noted the file, advised me to be cautious. That was 8 months ago. Since then, I'd stopped sharing details with anyone. No mention of accounts, no update about duty status, no calls on birthdays, holidays, or when Linda, the woman he married a year after my mother's funeral, hosted her yearly family barbecue with printed invites and a folded flag centerpiece. That last time I visited, Linda had pulled me aside after dinner and said, "You know, your father worries about you, all alone, all that money. It's too much for one person." I had said nothing, just watched the way she smiled when she said money, the way her hand rested lightly on my arm, not for affection but to suggest ownership. When I came home on leave, the house had changed. My mother's things were gone. Her calendar, her filing cabinet, even the brass lamp she used for sewing. In its place, sleek furniture, soft white lighting, curated decor. Linda called it a fresh start. My room remained mostly untouched, though the closet had been emptied, my uniforms folded too neatly on the bottom shelf. On the nightstand sat a printed folder labeled Family Finances. I didn't open it. I already knew it wasn't a mistake. After that visit, I changed my passwords. I moved my accounts to a credit union out of state. I stopped forwarding mail, and when Linda called to check in, I let the voicemail fill with polite concern before deleting it. I didn't block her. I wanted the messages, just in case. When the court notice arrived, I wasn't surprised, just confirmed. I opened my laptop and reviewed the scanned documents from the hearing. Everything was in order. I tagged them, encrypted the folder, and sent a duplicate to my secure cloud storage. Then I opened a second file, this one older. Inside were scanned images of my enlistment paperwork. Physical copies had been stored at my mother's old desk before it disappeared. I kept the scans with me on a flash drive, along with every evaluation, every logistics report, every award or citation, no matter how minor. People think support work means paperwork. They're not wrong. But what they don't understand is that paperwork is protection. It's what proves that a convoy left at 3 o'clock, that the replacement parts were requisitioned and shipped, that your absence from a ceremony wasn't dereliction, it was rotation, that your injury was recorded, reviewed, and handled according to procedure. Paperwork keeps the quiet jobs from being erased. I printed 3 pages that evening, my DD-214, my deployment orders, and a pay stub with official codes. Not for court, for something else. I placed them in an envelope and sealed it. Then I wrote a name on the front in neat black ink, Judge Ellen Morales. I had recognized her during the hearing. She hadn't mentioned her service in open court. She didn't need to. When she read my unit patch out loud, her voice shifted, fractionally, like someone remembering a language they hadn't spoken in years. I would send the documents to her chamber, not as a legal filing, but as courtesy, confirmation, military to military, not for appeal, not for applause, just clarity. The next morning, I mailed the envelope at the post office near the base. No return address, just initials in the corner. I watched the clerk weigh it, stamp it, and drop it into the canvas bin. Then I walked to the parking lot, unlocked my car, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The radio was off, the air smelled like frost and coffee. I let myself stay still. I thought of my father's voice in the courtroom, calm, certain. I don't recognize the person she claims to be. He had used that phrase before. I was 18 the first time. It was after basic training. I had come home for 3 days. He picked me up from the bus station, asked about the flight, said the yard needed mowing. At dinner, Linda had complimented the way I stood straighter, said it was good to see someone benefit from structure. My father had nodded. Then he looked across the table and said, "You're different. I don't recognize you anymore." At the time, I thought he meant it as praise. Now I knew better. He didn't mean I'd changed. He meant I'd left his reach. And people like him don't like losing narrative. After the court case, local chatter picked up. An old neighbor called and left a message, soft, cautious. "Heard you were in court. Hope everything's okay." No details, just a temperature check. I didn't call back. A week later, someone sent a link to an editorial in the local paper. The author wrote about the rising trend of false veterans claiming valor and how even daughters of respected families aren't immune to the lure of recognition. No names, but the intent was clear. I didn't respond. I bookmarked it. I saved the screenshot. 2 days later, an envelope arrived without a return address. Inside, a clipping from the same paper, underlined in red, fabricated narratives, questionable claims, family disappointment. I folded the clipping and placed it with the others. The war, I understood now, wasn't about my records. It was about my absence from their version of the story. They needed me to be either broken or grateful, not steady, not silent, not in possession of something they couldn't edit. Linda tried once more. She showed up at the supply office unannounced, wearing a white coat and smile. Said she was just in the area. I stepped into the hallway and closed the office door behind me. "Hi," she said, bright. "I heard about the hearing. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." I didn't answer. She tilted her head. "Tom's been under stress. This hasn't been easy for him." I waited. "You know he just wants what's best for the family." I said nothing. Her smile wavered. "Sarah, come on. We don't have to do this." I nodded once. "No," I said. "We don't." I turned, opened the office door, and stepped back inside. She didn't follow. That night, I walked the perimeter of my apartment complex. Cold air cut across my cheeks. I kept my hands in my pockets. I thought about my mother's voice, low, steady, tired near the end. "You don't have to fix everything. Just keep your records straight." I had. Every page, every note, every call. My records were intact, and now, so was I. I tore the ligaments in my knee during a night shift on base. It wasn't dramatic. A supply crate shifted. I adjusted wrong. My left foot caught the edge of the platform, and there was a sound, not loud, not sharp, just wrong, like wet cloth tearing. I dropped fast. The cold concrete met my palms before I felt the pain. That came next, heat at first, then pressure, then the kind of stillness your body uses to brace for what's coming. The medic said not to move. I didn't. They cut my pant leg at the clinic. My knee had already swollen, skin stretched tight over strange angles. The physician's assistant looked at the scans and said the words I didn't want. "Significant damage, not irreparable, but you'll need surgery, soon." She hesitated before giving me the timeline. "This week," she said. "Maybe next, but waiting's not a good option." I nodded. Approval would take longer. Military medicine moves on signatures and systems. I submitted the request, filled the forms, waited. The pain didn't wait. It pulsed through gauze, ice packs, prescription labels. It changed the shape of my days. I considered going off base. It would mean paying up front. I didn't have the full amount, but I had good credit and a family. I called my father from my bunk. It was late. My roommate was gone. The air smelled like antiseptic and old takeout. He answered on the third ring. His voice was relaxed. "Hey, kiddo." I explained it plainly. No emotion, no hint of desperation. I told him the cost, the recovery time, the risk if I waited. I said I would pay it back. There was a pause. I knew the sound of it. He used it before saying no. Always calmly, always with a reason that couldn't be argued. "We just bought the boat," he said. "You know that." My knee throbbed. "It's my leg, Dad." "I know, it's just bad timing." "You think I'll adapt," I said. "You're young. You always land on your feet." He meant it as reassurance. It landed like a door closing. My mother picked up the extension. Her voice was soft. "Maybe this is a lesson," she said. "You chose this career." My sister laughed in the background. "You're tough. You'll figure it out." I hung up before my hands could shake. The next morning, I limped down the hall to my CO's office and asked for leave. Not medical, personal. She didn't ask questions. I packed my duffel, called a rideshare, and let myself into the small off-base apartment I'd been renting since I transferred. The blinds were shut. The air was stale. I sat on the edge of the couch, boot off, leg elevated, pill bottle on the table. That night, I slept in fragments. The next morning, I called my brother. He answered on the first ring. "You hurt?" "Yes." There was no pause. "I'll be there in 3 hours." He showed up in a borrowed truck with a backpack full of energy drinks and a coat that smelled like diesel. He worked at a shop outside Des Moines, hands cracked, eyes tired. He looked at my leg and swore. "They said no," he said. Not a question. I nodded. He didn't ask for details. just reached into his jacket and handed me a crumpled wad of bills. $800, he said. Sold my tools, most of them. You need those, he shrugged. You need to walk. He didn't stay long, just sat with me for 20 minutes, eating crackers from the box I hadn't thrown out, then left without asking for anything in return. I didn't cry. I wrote the amount on a page in my ledger, marked the date, and set it aside. Then I made a list of emergency lenders. The payday loan office smelled like cheap coffee and tired air. The man behind the desk talked in slow, careful phrases. He walked me through the interest rate, the penalties, the risks. I signed. The surgery was scheduled for Thursday. The morning of the procedure, I wore a borrowed hoodie and didn't speak. The nurse adjusted the IV. The anesthesiologist asked me to count backward. I made it to 7. When I woke, my leg was bound in bandages and metal. The pain was different now, clean, bordered, contained. The surgeon said, "You'll recover, if you do the work." I nodded. Recovery came with its own costs. The first loan payment was due in 4 days. I had $47 in my account. I did the math. It didn't work. That evening, I emptied drawers, sold a desk, a set of dishes, a jacket I liked. I listed my textbooks from training on a resale site. Still not enough. Then I remembered the gas station receipt. I'd bought water and ibuprofen and a lottery ticket. Out of reflex, not hope. I dug it from my jacket pocket and checked the numbers. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. It wasn't life-changing, but it was enough. Enough to cover the payment. Enough to breathe. I went to the bank in person, paid it early, asked for the terms again, and recalculated the remaining schedule. The manager asked if I was expecting more cash soon. I said no. I just liked knowing where I stood. That week, I called a lawyer. Not a flashy one. The kind with a small office and a precise secretary. I told him I wanted to review my financial protections. I didn't name anyone, just listed what I owned, what I earned, what was traceable. He nodded through the call, asked one question at the end. "Are you expecting interference?" I said. "Not yet, but I'm expecting pressure." He said I was right to plan. That was when the shape of it started to form, not revenge. Not confrontation, just protection. A month later, Linda sent an email. Subject, just checking in. Body, hope you're feeling better. Tom mentioned your surgery. Let us know if you need anything or if you need help managing the recovery. Sometimes it's hard to handle paperwork when you're overwhelmed. There was a smiley face at the end. I replied once. Subject, no assistance needed. Body, recovery proceeding on schedule, documentation in order. I signed it formally. No greeting, no warmth. She didn't reply. Instead, she posted a photo online. Her and my father on the boat, glasses raised, captioned, "Peace and Family." I bookmarked it. Then I filed it. A few weeks later, another alert came. Someone had searched for my full name along with financial access forms. Not an application, just a query. But it came from a computer linked to my hometown library. I flagged the account, updated security questions, changed addresses on every record, transferred sensitive information to a P.O. box out of state. Then I bought a fireproof safe. I didn't share the code. At my next base evaluation, they asked how recovery was going. I said, efficiently. They asked if I had family support. I said no. The officer nodded, marked it down, didn't ask again. 2 months passed. Then came the letter. A formal inquiry, unsigned, asking whether my use of military affiliation in local profiles was appropriate. It was sent to my old high school alumni group, the kind used by board members and local business committees. I recognized the phrasing. It mirrored the petition. I replied once. Attached, my discharge papers, unit ID, and a short statement. My service record is confirmed. Any attempt to challenge this is defamatory. I didn't include a signature block. They removed the complaint. The next day, Linda called. I didn't answer. Then my father called. He left a message. "We need to talk." I saved it. Then I sent an official request to the courthouse. I wanted the transcript of the hearing, every word, not because I needed it, because I knew they'd try again, and I had decided once would be enough. I came home after the funeral with a manila envelope in my bag and the sound of my grandfather's voice still in my ear. He'd left me 2 messages in the last month before he passed. Not dramatic, just steady. The second one ended with a sentence he'd used once before during one of our late calls. "You understand silence," he'd said. "That's why this is for you." The envelope held everything: a notarized will, deed copies, instructions. It named me executor of his remaining properties, including 2 working ranches and a house in Los Angeles he'd purchased in 1993 under a shell company. The kind of thing he never explained, just set in motion and left alone. I hadn't told anyone. Not then. Not at the funeral. And not as I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, gravel crackling under tires like a warning. The porch was the same, white paint peeling, chimes moving in the February wind. I raised my hand to knock. That's when I heard them. The door was shut, but voices carried. "She's here," my mother said. "I saw her car." My father's voice followed. Flat. "Good. Everyone remember what we talked about." I didn't move. My brother laughed. "Just don't let her get dramatic. She always does that." My sister added, quieter, "You think she'll try to take charge?" "She always does," my mother said. "Acts like she's better." Then she lowered her voice. "That's why we have to stay calm, sympathetic. If she thinks we're on her side, she'll sign whatever we put in front of her." I stayed perfectly still. "What we talked about," she'd said. "Sign what?" I thought. My father exhaled. "The lawyer said it's easier if she cooperates, especially with her history." "PTSD," my mother said. "Long deployments, exhaustion. We can frame it as concern." "Is that legal?" my sister asked. My mother snapped, "Don't be naive. It's for her own good. Temporary guardianship. Just until things are settled." My brother sounded amused. "Once it's done, she won't be able to touch anything." My father replied, bored. "First, we secure authority. Then we talk assets." I didn't knock. I stepped back, waited, breathed. Grandpa's voice again. "Silence isn't weakness, it's timing." I counted to 12, then opened the door and walked in. I wore no makeup. My eyes looked hollow by design. I hadn't spoken to anyone since the graveside. The uniform jacket was folded under my arm. My mother reached me first. "Oh, honey," she said, "you must be so tired." My father nodded. "Long drive." My siblings hovered, watching, measuring. I let my shoulders drop, let my voice go quiet. "It's been a lot," I said. She steered me to the couch, adjusted a pillow behind my back, handed me a glass of water. "You shouldn't be making any big decisions right now," she said. I nodded. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and anxiety. My father stood by the window, arms crossed, saying little. That was his way when he felt control within reach. My sister lingered in the doorway. My brother scrolled his phone, all of them too alert. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. My mother sat beside me. "After everything," she said, "you don't need pressure. Let us help." I looked at her, blinked once. "I don't know what to do right now," I said softly. That landed the way they'd hoped. They relaxed, just a little. My father finally spoke. "Did the lawyer mention anything? Documents? Debt?" I hesitated. Enough to be believable. "He said there were complications," I said. "Some tax issues, legal fees. Might take time." I didn't say, and I'm the only name on it. I let the lie hover. My sister frowned. "So it's not good?" "From what I understand," I said, "it's not simple." My mother patted my hand. "That's why you need support." The next day, I met with a real attorney, one of my choosing. Not local, not known. I brought copies of the will. We filed a quiet notice of probate, sealed, private, legally protected. Back at the house, they watched me closely. I played tired, distracted, cooperative. They asked again about paperwork. I said the attorney advised me to wait. Then my phone went missing. I had left it on the dresser in the guest room. When I checked, the battery was low, screen smudged. My mother entered behind me with a bright voice. "We plugged it in downstairs," she said, "so you could rest." I let her take it. That night, I moved the important papers to my jacket lining. I wore it while I slept. The next morning, the doctor arrived, a man in a beige coat, clipboard in hand, claimed he was stopping by just to check in, asked polite questions. "How's your sleep? Are you overwhelmed? Any trouble concentrating?" I gave short, blank answers. Nothing actionable, nothing definitive. He left after 15 minutes. I watched through the window as he handed a folder to my father. The same afternoon, my sister appeared in the guest room with tea and a pen. "Just a few forms," she said. "Nothing binding." I smiled and didn't touch them. Later that evening, my brother tried a different tactic. He sat on the porch with me, offered a beer, leaned back in the chair like we were kids again. "You've been through a lot," he said. "You don't have to handle this solo." I nodded slowly, then asked, "Would you?" He tilted his head. "Would I what?" "Hand over everything, if it were yours." He paused. "No." I looked back out over the yard. The maple tree we used to climb was still bare. Its shadow stretched across the dead grass. He didn't say anything else? That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until the house was silent, then opened the window and made a call from the driveway. Secure line, voicemail only. "This is Miller. The documents are intact. Proceed as planned." Next morning, the papers they'd prepared were gone. I watched my mother search the kitchen drawers, trying not to look frantic. My father closed his laptop with more force than necessary. My sister asked me 3 times whether I'd reconsidered signing. I said I was thinking about it. On the final night, they gathered in the living room. My father spoke first. "This has been hard on everyone. We think it's best if we manage things for a while, just until the estate is settled." He held out a new document, lighter, simpler. "Power of attorney," he said, "just temporary." I looked at it, didn't touch it. My mother said gently, "You don't want to be responsible for legal missteps. Probate is tricky." I let the moment stretch, then I stood. "I'm going to bed." They didn't stop me. At 3 a.m., I left. I packed silently, moved with practiced ease. I left the glass of water untouched, the pillow undisturbed, the couch still warm with their expectations. By the time the sun rose, I was back on the road. Behind me, a family preparing to profit from a lie. Ahead of me, a court document with my name on every line. And behind that, every receipt, every voicemail, every mistake they'd made while assuming I was weak. I didn't rush the next steps. The drive back to my apartment took 6 hours. I stopped twice, once for gas, once to stretch my leg. The roads were dry, the radio off. I kept the jacket folded on the passenger seat. Inside it, the original deeds, the will, the flash drive. Every file password protected, every password memorized. By the time I arrived, there were 3 new voicemails. One from my mother, light and concerned. "We're just wondering where you went, sweetheart." One from my father, clipped. "We need to speak. Call me." One from Linda, performative. "We're worried. You seemed confused." I didn't return any of them. Instead, I made 3 calls of my own. First, to the lawyer downtown. I confirmed we'd filed notice with the probate court under the Quiet Administration Clause. He said yes. The judge had approved it. Second, to the county recorder's office. I asked if any other parties had inquired about the estate in my name. They had. A request had come in 2 days earlier. Denied. Incomplete documentation. Flagged as suspicious. Third, to the base legal office. I asked for clarification on civil action protections for veterans under federal statute. Not hypothetical this time. Direct. The officer on the line paused before answering. "You have someone trying to act in your name?" "Trying," I said. "You're doing the right thing. Keep your trail clean." I already had. The next morning, I walked into the First Central Bank wearing a black sweater, slacks, and a face they didn't recognize. I handed the manager my ID and a letter of authority notarized that week. He looked up from the counter. "Is this related to the estate?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded. Took me to a private room, pulled up the accounts, my accounts now, and handed me the statements. The numbers were larger than I'd expected. My grandfather had been precise, conservative, but consistent. The Los Angeles property had appreciated nearly threefold. The ranches were under cooperative management, generating modest but reliable income. The accounts had never been touched, except for the one attempt, flagged 6 months ago, then denied. My father's name wasn't listed anywhere. The manager asked, "Do you want to change the account structure?" "No," I said. "Just add protections." He typed for nearly 10 minutes. When he was done, he slid a printed page across the table. I read it twice. That evening, I drafted a letter. Short, direct, formal. It read, "Effective immediately, all matters related to the estate of Richard Allen Miller are under legal administration. No third-party inquiries are authorized. Any further attempts to access, redirect, or influence the disposition of assets will be documented and addressed through appropriate channels." I printed 3 copies. One went to my family's attorney, one to the probate court, filed under the case number, one to the post office box my parents had used for business mail since 2004. I did not include a return address. 3 days passed. Then came the silence. No calls, no emails, no mailed forms disguised as family concern. Just a pause. Measurable. That meant they were regrouping. They would try another angle. Linda struck first. A letter. Printed in cursive font, on ivory cardstock. The envelope was hand-addressed. No return name. Inside, 4 paragraphs about family, loss, reconciliation. A 5th paragraph that pivoted. "It would mean so much to Tom if you could just clarify the ownership situation. He's feeling excluded from decisions, and that's not fair after everything he's done for this family." There was no mention of the hearing, no apology. At the bottom, a question. "Can we count on you to make this right?" I placed the letter into my file box, logged the date, did not respond. 2 days later, I received an alert from the recorder's office. Someone had submitted an amended claim to the probate file. It was unsigned. Attached, an affidavit drafted by a different attorney, one not local. The affidavit made vague allusions to my recent instability and decision-making capacity under emotional distress. There was no evidence, just implication. I called my attorney, sent the file. He replied the same afternoon. "They're posturing, and badly." The next week, a new name appeared on the file, Judge Ellen Morales, the same one from the military petition. She'd been reassigned to the probate case due to rotation. Standard, unplanned, but exact. I sent her chambers a notice of appreciation, quiet, professional, no expectation of reply. She did reply, a formal note signed and sealed. Service records received, case noted, no further action required at this time. That was her way of saying, "I remember." The next event was public. A veterans charity held a recognition dinner downtown. I attended in uniform, not for ceremony, just presence. My father was there. So was Linda. They hadn't expected me. He wore his navy jacket, the same one from the courthouse. His hands were clasped in front of him as the speakers read names from the list. When they called mine, I stood. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of room. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I walked to the front, accepted the folded certificate, turned and returned to my seat. That was it. But I saw his posture change, his certainty shrink. Later, during the reception, Linda approached. She didn't smile. "Is this how it's going to be?" she asked. I looked at her. Steady. "It's already been," I said. She said nothing, turned, walked away. The next morning, I mailed the last batch of documents to the estate attorney. Signed, notarized, final. There would be no more claims, no more redirection, and no more performance. The story had moved out of their hands. The last attempt came through official channels, a motion filed under new counsel, different name, same language. They requested the court reopen the estate under shared oversight, citing emotional distress, confusion, and non-collaborative behavior by the executor. They attached no evidence, just character statements. One from my sister describing me as high-functioning but detached. Another from my brother, more hesitant, framing it as concern. She's private to a fault. We just want to help. Linda's name wasn't on the filing. Neither was my father's. But the firm listed as co-counsel had a history of quiet litigation. Aggressive, subtle, designed for families that couldn't afford scandal. I read the motion twice. Then I replied. A single affidavit. Attached. My full service record, financial documentation, medical history, communications log, evidence of prior unauthorized access attempts, and the court's prior ruling on false claims of misrepresentation. I kept the tone factual, cold, professional. At the bottom, a statement. Executor is willing to comply with all legal obligations. Executor is not obligated to justify refusal of unauthorized co-ownership claims. I submitted it at 9:06 a.m. By 2 p.m., the judge had issued a summary denial. Motion rejected, request denied, record sealed. It was over. Not because I fought, because I had already won. Because the truth, once recorded, doesn't blink. That evening, I made coffee and watched it go cold. I let the apartment stay dark. The radiator clicked on. Outside, someone scraped ice off a windshield. The sound was clean, rhythmic, real. My inbox stayed quiet. No appeals, no new messages, just silence. I cleaned the files from my desktop, archived the duplicates, secured the safe, and then I sat. Not triumphant, just still. The next day, a letter arrived. Thin envelope, my father's handwriting on the front. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a legal pad. It read, "I hope you're satisfied." No signature, no address. I read it once, then burned it in the sink. I didn't keep the ashes. Weeks passed. Spring came late. The trees outside the complex remained brittle, slow to leaf. On the first warm Saturday, I drove west toward the ranch, not to take possession, not to change anything, just to see it. The land was plain, fenced in sections, weathered barn at the edge, everything the same as it had been in the survey photos, practical, quiet, unbothered. I stepped out of the car, let the wind move over me. No ceremony, no claim, just presence. My grandfather's initials were still etched into the corner post. RAM faint now, half erased by time. I didn't touch them. I walked the perimeter once, noted the outbuildings, the storage shed, the troughs. Then I returned to the car. I didn't need to stay. It wasn't about standing in it. It was about knowing it was mine. That night, I received a text from my sister. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. She sent a second one the next day. No one expected it to go this far. Then, "He's not doing well." Then silence again. No one asked what I needed. No one said they were sorry. I didn't expect them to. 3 weeks later, my father appeared at a veterans breakfast in town. I wasn't there, but someone sent a photo. He stood off to the side, wearing a new tie. No speech, no mention of a daughter. Just silence. A woman I barely knew, a former supply officer, sent me a message afterward. He looked like someone who thought he'd get credit for showing up. I didn't respond. There's nothing to say to people who still think attendance means absolution. My father never contacted me directly again. The letters stopped. The calls stopped. Linda deleted the family group chat. My brother sent a birthday card. No message. Just his name. I kept it. Not out of sentiment. Just as a note of witness. By summer, the estate had fully cleared, titles transferred, trusts established. The Los Angeles property sold quietly, its proceeds divided by a legal structure no one else could access. I gave half to a veteran fund under my grandfather's name. No announcement, no check photo, no public list. The rest remained in holding, not hidden, just not shared. The attorney asked once if I wanted to file a civil suit. "You could," he said. "Interference, harassment, attempted fraud." I shook my head. "No need," I said. They'd already lost. Because control isn't held in courtrooms. It's in what you don't need to explain, what you no longer answer to. That fall, I returned to my base to finalize discharge. Clean slate. My leg had healed fully, just as the surgeon said. I passed the mobility test with a 2-second margin. The officer recording my final paperwork asked what I planned to do next. I said I hadn't decided. That was true. I was thinking of logistics consulting, maybe agricultural contracts, maybe nothing for a while. He nodded, then glanced at my file. "That's quite a stack," he said. I shrugged. "I keep records." He smiled once. "You'll be fine." I already was. On my final day, I packed my duffel in silence. No fanfare, no one waiting outside the gate. I walked past the flagpole, through the checkpoint, and kept going. Home didn't pull. It didn't need to. What I carried was mine now, no one else's. I didn't call them when I left. I didn't tell them where I was going. They would have to adjust to a version of the story they didn't write, a version they couldn't erase. You stayed with me through this story. Now I wonder, where would you have drawn the line? What would you have done with silence? If you'd like more stories like this, you're welcome to stay connected. Quietly. No pressure. Just a thread in the dark when you want it.